On April 25th, students and teachers of many backgrounds and ethnicities joined forces at OES to advance their understanding of cultural and societal differences within the Portland and United States community. This year's keynote speaker, Sally Cohn, drew parallels between the current state of the government and her role as a self-proclaimed bully in the 5th grade. The closing speaker and slam poet S.C. Says closed the wonderful day of learning with a psychologically riveting slam poetry performance. In my 4 years at OES, I have never experienced a culture shock quite like this one. Students were active and involved while not shying away from fruitful conversation. I caught up with OES's head of equity and inclusion, Dory King, to hear her opinion, as well as the opinions of several other students. Cameron Ingalls is a junior at Oregon Episcopal School who has been a member of ISA since the 3rd trimester of his freshman year. He has participated in the planning of 2 culture shocks and was heavily invested in the first one. I caught up with him to ask his opinion, culture shock in general. So, why did you decide to join ISA the first time, and why have you decided to stick with ISA?
Well, as a freshman, I wanted to get involved with my community, kind of earn my place in the OES community. I decided the best way to do that would be to help create some of the cultural events that we have here, such as Midwinter Madness. So I served on that committee for the first 2 trimesters, like I said. At the end, our event was done, and we didn't really have any work, so I talked to Derry Bash, and he said he could transfer me into ISA. And so I walked in, and as soon as I walked in, I was welcomed. It was a warm place. I knew some of the people. We had nice conversations, and I knew it was like an important job, planning culture shock. So I just decided to stick with it. And plus there's snacks every week, so.
So did you join 3rd trimester? That's before culture shock, correct?
That was after.
After culture shock.
Yeah, but I knew that was kind of the part of the gig was planning culture shock, so decided to try it.
So when you first heard of culture shock as a freshman, people have all of these preconceived notions about culture shock. I know as a freshman I wasn't too keen on it, but I've come to appreciate it. What were your thoughts on culture shock as a freshman?
I think a lot of freshmen don't think culture shock is that great of a thing, and they don't appreciate the hard work that goes into it until they go. And so before I went, I heard from seniors and sophomores and juniors or whatever, oh, culture shock's boring, it's just a day where we sit around and listen. And I was like, okay, this is kind of not going to be great. And I was kind of skeptical, but I went and I really enjoyed myself. I had good classes, great discussions, met new people. And that's part of the reason why I decided to join ISA is because I wanted to be a part of that.
Nice. So this past year's culture shock, I'd say personally, and I'm not just saying this out of a recency bias because I've been to all 4 culture shocks. I've learned something valuable from each. But I feel like this one was the most fluid, the most fun one I've been to because Sally Cohn was, while I didn't agree with all of her points, she was very entertaining and fun to listen to. And then the workshops were engaging. Like I went to a dumpling workshop. I learned how to make dumplings. I went to a workshop with Nolani on the N-word, and then we were actually in that same workshop.
Yeah, I remember.
And then I went to a workshop on the hip-hop scene in Portland. So, it was a great range. How do you think that this year's culture shock and the variety of workshops at culture shock compares to years past and your experiences?
Well, I've only been heavily part of planning the last 2 culture shock. This year as a junior, and then last year as a sophomore. And I think what I've witnessed is that each year we look at what happened in the previous year and we try to build on it and see, we look at the feedback forms that people turned in and we say, okay, what can we change and what can we make better? And I think we're always trying to continually make things better. For example, we had at least one whole activity period where we discussed whether or not to use the old ISA video or create a new one that was kind of updated, I'll say. And I think it's just about listening to each other's feedback and kind of working off building blocks and working off a foundation that we already have.
Garrett Vassley is a junior at Oregon Episcopal School who first joined ISA in the 2nd trimester of his freshman year. I caught up with him to ask his opinion about culture shock this year and his experiences in ISA in general. Why did you decide to join ISA the first time, and why have you decided to continue to be a member of ISA since?
Yeah, so I actually decided to join ISA on a whim. I didn't really get into MUN as I wanted to, so I just decided to join ISA just to try it out and see how it was, and I really liked it, so I just decided to stay because I really like talking about social issues and current events, and planning culture shock is always really fun.
Yeah, so you've been to 3 culture shocks now. How would you say that culture shock in general has improved each year?
I feel like culture shock has been on an upward trend since I've been at OES. The first one I went to, it was okay. The second one was good. The speaker was good, but the very end of culture shock wasn't up to par, and we had a lot of stuff that we were talking about where we wanted it to improve. But I feel like this year we kind of hit the nail with what we wanted to do with culture shock, and I feel like this was the best one that I have been to personally.
Milo Kashi is a junior at Oregon Episcopal School who has been here since his sophomore year. He has participated in the planning of 2 culture shocks and has been able to see 2 culture shocks. I caught up with him to ask his opinion on culture shock in general. You've experienced 2 culture shocks. How would you say that this year's culture shock improves on last year's culture shock?
Well, I would say we definitely looked at last year. What we're doing right now actually is we get the stats from I don't know who does it, but we get a list of stats of people who were there, and a form was sent out, and so we look at the feedback from all the form, and then we try to improve. So I know last year we had a great speaker, and so we really tried to build on that this year by getting 2 great speakers.
They were entertaining, so.
Yeah, so we got more feedback as to having an artistic speaker. Like last year we had Gina Loring, who was also a slam poet, so we finished with another slam poet because we recognized the good impact from the crowd. Other things, errors from 2 years ago. We did, so 2 years ago, or last year I guess, we had an open time at the end in the 3rd workshop. We had basically, if you weren't in an affinity group, you were just kind of in an open space, we got negative feedback from that because nobody was really talking. They had nothing to talk about, to converse and share experiences. So we made it a little bit more structured, adding a 3rd workshop option instead of just a big room with a lot of people. Now we added a small room with a chosen workshop.